I didn't plan to be late. That's the part I keep replaying, not the argument, not the newsroom footage, not even the look on my father-in-law's face when everything shifted. Just the moment before the choice. The dog was lying half in the road, half on the gravel shoulder, ribs fluttering like paper. Cars were swerving. Some slowed, none stopped. I checked the time on the dashboard. First day. New role. My wife's father's company. The kind of position people whisper about earned or arranged. The dog tried to stand and collapsed. I pulled over without deciding to. When I lifted it, it didn't bite. It just trembled. There was blood on its hind leg. A delivery truck from our company sped past, horn blaring, missing the animal by inches. I remember thinking, this is going to cost me. I remember not caring. By the time I reached the office, my shirt was wrinkled, my hands still faintly shaking from the emergency clinic paperwork. I had called ahead, no answer. The reception area went quiet when I walked in. Not hostile, just observant. He was already waiting in the conference room. My father-in-law doesn't raise his voice. He removes warmth instead. "You're 37 minutes late on your first day," he said, checking his watch, not me. I stopped to help an injured dog. It was in the road. A pause. He leaned back. "You chose an injured stray dog over the company." It wasn't a question. It would have caused an accident. That is speculation. Discipline is not. He folded his hands on the table. "You wanted this position to prove you belong here. Today you proved something else." I felt the old pressure rise, the one that says, defend yourself, justify, argue. But I didn't. Because the truth was simple. I hadn't weighed career against compassion. I hadn't calculated optics. I had seen something hurting and acted. If that disqualified me, I wasn't sure I wanted qualification. "You're fired," he said, tone steady as if announcing quarterly numbers. There it was, clean, final. Not anger, not drama. A conclusion. I nodded. My wife wasn't there. I was glad. I didn't want her caught between us. I stood up to leave. That's when the HR manager burst in without knocking. He was pale truly. Pale, not embarrassed, not flustered in the corporate sense. Something else. "Sir," he said, breath uneven, "you need to turn on the news. Now." My father-in-law frowned. "We're in a meeting. It's about one of our trucks." The word "our" changed the air. The television in the lobby was already playing. Staff clustered around it in silence. On screen, a familiar stretch of road. My route. A reporter stood near twisted metal. 3 vehicles crumpled, flashing lights, ambulances. A multi-vehicle collision occurred this morning when an injured animal reportedly entered the roadway, the reporter said. My stomach dropped. They replayed traffic cam footage. Timestamp, 8:12 a.m. The dog, limping, disoriented, dragged itself back into the lane. A sedan swerved. A delivery truck ours braked too late. Impact. Chain reaction. The reporter continued. Witnesses say an unidentified driver had earlier removed an injured dog from this stretch of road, potentially preventing an earlier incident. Earlier. I checked my phone. 8:03 a.m. That's when I had lifted the dog, but the clinic was only 5 minutes away. I had circled back onto a side road to avoid traffic. The footage showed the dog returning to the road after I left. I felt something hollow open in my chest. I had helped, and it hadn't been enough. The HR manager turned toward my father-in-law. "Legal is already calling. The truck was en route to the client launch. Media is identifying our logo." The camera zoomed in on the side panel. Our company name clear as daylight. My father-in-law's jaw tightened. Not panic. Calculation. "This could have been worse," the HR manager said carefully, "if the earlier bystander hadn't intervened at all." Silence. Everyone in the lobby knew. I hadn't announced it. I didn't need to. My stained shirt said enough. One of the junior staff whispered. That was him. No one looked at me with admiration. Just recognition. My father-in-law finally met my eyes. It wasn't apology I saw. It was adjustment. The board members began arriving within the hour. Crisis response mode, risk assessment, public relations strategy. The conversation pivoted quickly from discipline to liability, from punctuality to optics. Someone from communications suggested a statement highlighting corporate values aligned with community responsibility. Another mentioned expanding the dormant corporate social responsibility program. They used neutral language. No one referenced the firing. Eventually, in a smaller conference room, my father-in-law spoke directly to me. "You understand the sensitivity of this situation," he said. "I do." He studied me for a moment. "We are forming a new initiative: community engagement, safety awareness, animal rescue partnerships. I want you to lead it." It wasn't an apology. It was an offer shaped like strategy. "You said I lacked discipline," I replied evenly. "I said you made a choice. And now? Now that choice aligns with the company's interest." There it was, not warmth, not pride. Alignment. Power didn't flip dramatically. It settled. The board's presence made one thing unmistakable: my firing had been premature, reactionary, risky. Authority had intervened, not emotionally but structurally. "I'll take the role," I said. "But not as damage control, as policy. Clear budget, long-term commitment." A slight nod. "Of course." Of course. That evening my wife asked what happened. She had seen the news. I told her everything. She listened quietly. When I finished, she said, "He doesn't know how to admit he was wrong." "I know. Does that bother you?" I thought about it. Earlier that morning, holding a shaking animal on the asphalt, I hadn't been thinking about leverage or future headlines. I had just acted. That hadn't changed. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't. Because something had shifted, not just externally. I no longer needed his approval to define whether I belonged." At dinner later that week, my father-in-law raised a glass. "To the new initiative," he said, "and to decisive action." Our eyes met briefly. It wasn't reconciliation, but it wasn't dismissal anymore. The power in the room felt different. Not loud, not triumphant, just settled. I had been late on my first day. I wasn't late to myself.